Game data.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of the Game Data Podcast. Today, my guest is Nic Tringali, who made the weird, cool, outer space sci-fi strategy game, The Banished Vault. On this episode, we talk about procedural generation, data structures, how we store those datas, how those datas all come together and make a nice, weird strategy game that I myself have personally enjoyed as someone who also made a weird strategy game. I think you'll love hearing Nic and I talk about all the intricacies of designing and programming such a game, and I hope you learned something from the podcast just as I did.
Game data.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Game Data Podcast, or the Game Data Podcast, episode number 2. We're still trying to figure out the name of it. You know, we're gonna work through it. But on this episode, we're also going to work through talking about The Banished Vault with none other than one Nic Tringali. Nic, thanks for being on the show.
Hello, thank you for having me on.
I am so excited to talk to you about The Banished Vault. We met at GDC for the first time in person.
Yeah.
This past 2024 GDC. And I was excited to see you because I was excited to see someone else that's made a weird strategy game, because there's not a lot of us, and I feel like we have to stick together. And it was so great to see you and be like, yes.
Yeah. No, I remember when I heard of Cantata and I was like, what is this? What's going on here? It was similar, like, oh, interesting.
It's like someone's doing something that's not just copying Civilization again. I
love Civ, but like, why? It's so hard to copy. It's so,
many have tried and continue to fail. Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah. So I was really excited to see The Banished Vault. I'm wondering for our listenership, if you can just, who are you? What are you doing? And then just kind of describe some of The Banished Vault, because we can talk about some interesting parts of it, but I'm interested to hear how you describe it.
Yeah. So I call myself a game designer. I do direction and programming and all sorts of little things. I work at Bithell Games at the kind of Lunar Division label, which is essentially just like, hey, we're making like really small little games and they're kind of weird, so we're going to put them out on this label. And the first game was The Banished Vault, which came out in July 23. And it is a strategy game about being in a kind of gothic monastery that's traveling interstellar space, and you're being pursued by this kind of otherworldly entity, and you go from solar system to solar system. You have to gather resources and kind of do a little base building, a little bit of kind of resource management, time management, and the whole thing is kind of bound up in semi-realistic math, and kind of really puts you face first into like the rocket fuel problem and like, you know, energy and delta V and that kind of thing, but further wrapped in a like gothic horror environment that is pretty much just like, hey, going to space kind of seems like a bad time. What if it was also like a religiously bad time? And yeah, so there's a lot of little things in it, but we could definitely get into it. But I think that's basically the pitch.
And I don't want to undersell too, just like the style of it. Like the game, I guess the game as played is like, I don't know if you call it like cartographic, if that's even a word. It's sort of like you're looking at like a star chart, but outside of that is this like, my first reference point was actually, I don't know if you played like Escape the Dark Castle or Escape the Dark Sector.
Dark Sector specifically, yeah.
Yeah, so like that sort of sketchy, kind of almost like role-playing game style aesthetic, but like with this cosmic horror twist.
Yeah, a lot of woodcut art, like digital and woodcut kind of blended together. And yeah, the map is what I say with the map is like if you've ever seen those like subway charts of the solar system, right? And it takes like this much energy to go to orbit and then that much energy to go to Mars. It's that same concept basically, but broken out and kind of parameterize into a game, basically.
You want to start there? We want to just,
sure.
It's always funny talking this show because I feel like we could have a normal podcast talking about the games and we could talk about how beautiful it is and the design. But on game data, we go a little bit below the surface. So maybe let's start there. So let's talk about specifically, so the solar systems, as I understand them, and sort of the structure of play is that, I don't know if you call it like a mission or kind of like the unit of play kind of between that happens. You kind of do multiple of these in sequence.
Yeah.
What is that? What is the word for that?
If we want to start like atomizing things, right? Like the whole element is like a journey, right? So like start to finish, you press start game, you do new journey. Within each journey, you hit a sequence of solar systems, and then that's just like a system. And then the goal of the journey is to like build these special buildings. You have to build 4 buildings, one in each, or well, not in each solar system, one is as often as you can. And then when you hit 4, the journey's done. And then the solar system is composed of planets and asteroids and all the things that you kind of do in the game. And then the journey itself doesn't have any like characteristic to it, really.
Gotcha. Yeah, I guess, I mean, so just starting there, like in terms of like the data lens that game data purports to talk about, right? So you're starting, the game is procedurally generated, as I understand it. Are you like, how much generation? And then also like, what is the nature of the thing that is being generated from sort of a code data perspective? Like we press start, what are we getting and what does it look like?
Yeah. So if you want to like skip over the tutorial, which are like pre-seeded.
I want to talk about the tutorial. We can talk about that. We can talk about it later.
Yeah. We'll get to that. Yeah. But the skipping over the like pre-seeded tutorial, the game is like almost completely procedurally generated. I don't think there's anything. Yeah. I mean, honestly, I don't think there's anything that's like definitely set really. Essentially what it does is it takes a solar system and the game, actually the journey, I should correct myself a minute ago. The journey is actually broken up into 3 acts. So there's like basically
is player visible?
No. Well, kind of. Well, it's a difficulty mode in a sense. We can get to that. But essentially, no, they're not 3 acts, but it kind of breaks up the intensity of how much strain the game is going to put you under. And so, and it just goes from like pretty hard to very hard. And there's like 5 solar systems. And so the game will say like, okay, you're in Act 1, pull me a solar system, like generate an Act 1 solar system. And if it's a normal system, which is just like a let's say Earth Sol type system, right? It's like, okay, generate 3 to 9 planets, or actually it'll be like generate 3 to 5 solid body planets, 1 to 2 gas giant planets, and like 0 to 1 asteroids. Put those in any order you want. And then go 1 level deeper, and then each planet is then given its own seed, and it says, okay, generate a planet given the, kind of parent parameters of the solar system. Then the planet goes, okay, I am a solid planet in Act 1. I get this many moons and, 1 to 3 moons or whatever. Then I'll generate the surface of my planet, which is like a small little grid that has resources on it. Put these types of resources on the grid and go from there. And
is there like, once we're in like the level of a planet, are you running sort of an independent generation step for each layer, or is there knowledge about kind of like parent steps? Like does a planet understand its role in the generation of a system, or is it kind of an independent generation?
So mostly no. What I will say, I guess, is like I've kind of pre-baked in some roles. So like there's Act 1 planets, or like Act 1 solid body planets, Act 1 gas giant planets, and then like Act 2 same and Act 3 same, right? So like broadly a planet will like have its parameters skewed depending on how difficult the game wants it to be. Where what the planets can't actually generate themselves are the resources. So the planet will say like, okay, here's how difficult it is to land on this planet, like numerically. Here's how many moons I have. Here's like my color, that kind of thing, right? Then when everything is like done, the system generation will say, now I will actually assign the resources to all the planets, because originally it was per planet and it was kind of a nightmare.
Yeah. It's like, imagine it would just, very random.
Yeah. It would just be like, oh, I've got like 8 iron here in the system and no water. And like, well, you'd need like both to do whatever. And then it was really, really hard to balance. And so at like, I think like a good like halfway through or 2/3 of the development, it was like, okay, enough of that. The system says this is an Act 1 system. It has X amount of iron, X amount of, or minimums of iron and water and basic resources. Put those on the planets and on the moons, and then any leftover spaces, because each body you arrive at has to have some kind of resource. Any leftover spaces, just stick whatever resource you want, given a kind of like weighted table. So like you favor iron and water and you don't get methane as often, that kind of thing. Because there's like a rarity kind of to the resources across the game in general.
So you're sort of generating, when you're generating a system, you generate like almost like like literal and metaphorical sort of surface area of distribution. And then you kind of do another pass at the system level that's like, let's put stuff. And I guess, are you considering sort of like in Banished Vault, for people who don't know, the way the game works is you sort of start at a specific spot on the map. And what that means in like space fuel rocket terms is that further distances require more fuel. Like, are
exponentially more fuel? Yeah.
Exponentially more fuel, right? Yeah. So are you considering that as part of the generation? Like, do you know, I guess in terms of distance from ship, like how does that sort of factor into the generative model?
The solar system, not the game system, because isn't it a fun word to have mean multiple things?
All the time. Yeah.
Yeah. So the solar system will say, okay, it costs more energy the further you go in, because you always start at the outer edge of the solar system. So the further you go in, the more energy and fuel you'll need to spend. And then there's more like actions there. So there's like game balancing happening. But then as far as resources go, those are actually truly pretty random. Like, I don't really want to weight resources to be closer or further away from the player. And purely that came around because it just felt like it would be really hard to balance and say, how do I calculate if the player is like low on a resource and should it give it to them, or should it put it at like the midway point of the solar system? Or if the player has too much of a resource, then do they not get any of if they've like stockpiled water, do they not get any water? And then you get to the level of like, well, if a player clocks onto that, then they'll start like taking not like degenerative play styles, but like they'll start the incentives start getting skewed to say, oh, okay, well, I'm never going to stock up on water because then I'll get And so at the end of the day, I'm also kind of fine if like you show up to a solar system and you look around and you go, oh, this is actually really easy. Like, this is so generous. Like, everything I need is right here. That's actually fine, because I'm not really bothered by a player. Like, there's enough other incentives in the game for like, well, you could just get what you want and leave, or you could kind of poke in a little bit more and get some of the knowledge, which buys you upgrades or do whatever. Right. And so it felt like, honestly, less work for me and like fairer for the player to be like, all the resources are random. You generally know that it takes more energy the further you go into a solar system, and just kind of leave it at that.
Because I can also imagine, like, because I mean, I've seen some like complex or just big generations from the game, but you're not generating like huge branching maps. And like you said, you're always sort of starting on the edge. Yeah. And so what that effectively means is that you're kind of on like a track. And I think as a player, you'd be able to really quickly intuit if there was a pattern where it's like, oh, well, they're always putting the thing I need just a little too far away. And then like, that's kind of a compelling decision the first once or twice, but then eventually you're like, okay, like, come on, like, well, and I don't want to make the same risk reward decision every single time. Exactly. And the other wrinkle to the game is so like there's a few wrinkles. One, it is essentially a one-dimensional map, right? Like there's there's some forks in a sense, but the real wrinkle is there's no fog of war, right? In that you show up at a solar system and you see where every resource is from the jump, right? And I talked about this in a roguelike celebration talk last year, but that came about partially because that's kind of how space exploration works now. Like, we know the material compositions of a bunch of places. And then when you go there, you're like, oh, actually, it's a huge pain in the ass to get all this water I knew was here because of XYZ reasons. And so, doing those kind of like thumb on the scale things, which is like, fine, I'm happy to do those. Generally, it would have been like pretty obvious. Or that's the fear, right? Maybe I could have gotten away with it, but also the gains didn't seem really worth the effort. I want to talk about too, just like sort of the character of the generation itself in terms of like the code and data. So is it a big inside, like the code is just like a list of planets, or like, is it like abstract data? Are you creating like a 2D grid and you're kind of like filling it in with like noise? Like, what is the actual process of generation that you're doing? Yeah. So I'm actually really happy with how this came together, because I sort of put together a couple like unique data structures for the planets and the systems. So it's a pretty straightforward like noise system, and it will just like
pick a seed and start generating numbers from there. If the solar system has a small chance of being like a unique system, which is like, oh, this system is only gas or only like asteroids, right? Like there's no planets, there's no solid or gas giant planets, right? And so like there's weird little skews there. And then when you get to like the data level, I do a lot of essentially like weighted die rolls to pull out values. So instead of like a range of like, oh, this planet has like a number of moons from like 0 to 2, it's like, well, actually this planet, it's like a 5-sided dice. You can have 2 zeros, 2 ones, and a 2 result of this, right?
Sure.
So like it's just slightly skewed. And that really helped give a lot of fine control on how the characteristics were done, because otherwise it was really, really hard to get like true math to work, especially for the equivalent of the delta V, which is just called energy. Like you can like put in planet density and scale and mass and all this stuff and like output a number. But at the end of the day, that is like really hard. Like it's so many steps removed from like what I'm doing that I kind of just know like, hey, okay, on this like Mars type planet, I know I want like broadly 3s and 4s for like the energy cost, and then maybe a slight chance of like a 5 and a 6 at the end of this curve, right? And so the whole game is filled with essentially these like arbitrarily sized dice that the noise system goes, great, just pull me a number and just use that and go from there.
And then I guess that's like, so I'm just imagining like this sort of algorithm inside the code. So you're picking random numbers, and that's sort of choosing, let's say we choose to have like some planet size. Is that like, is a planet, what is a planet? Is a planet some external data that you read in? Is that just like you have classes called like bigplanet.cs, or like what when you're picking something based on these die rolls, like what are you sort of picking, and how is what you're picking being put such that it can be picked, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So the game's made in Unity, and it's using scriptable objects, which is just like basically a cache of data that works with the Unity interface. So you can plug stuff in engine side, you can change stuff at runtime, which is really nice. And then so like a planet is basically how much energy does it take to land on this planet?
Each planet has its own scriptable object.
Yes. Each planet like definition, right? So like a definition will say, so like I basically have them like, okay, this is like a Mercury, a Mars, an Earth, and then you have like a Jupiter and a Saturn, right? And so the Mars is like this Mars definition. This is the like weighted range of the cost to land on this planet. It's like 3s and 4s, and then like a couple 5s and a 6 or something like that. And so it's actually stepping back for context. So then like a solar system will say like, okay, this solar system, because it's in Act 1, it can have 3 to 5 solid body planets, and there's a 30% chance that those are going to be Mars type planets. And so
are those like, is a system itself its own scriptable object kind of as a template, or? Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Same exact kind of model of like templated scriptable objects, basically. And so, going back to the planet, it's like, okay, how big, what's the like weighted range for the size of the planet, weighted range for moons, how many hazards can this planet have? And so like, that's where the like acts come in, is like early acts will say like, oh, actually planets can only have like, 50-50, 0 to 1. And then like Act 2, it's like, okay, you have a 20% chance of 0, then like a 70% chance of 1, and then, up to 2 or 3 or whatever. And then it goes into like colors and all that kind of like visual stuff, which is all the same principle.
And so but what about, so you have planets are defined as scriptable objects, and that's kind of, I guess, the smallest atomic unit of kind of the generation. Is that where it kind of starts, or they have their own? Okay. And then
no. Each planet is, the planet template is like the smallest bit. And then there's like asteroid templates and things like that, but they function basically in the same process.
And then those are all sort of tied up in, I guess, like a system. And then are acts, like how do acts interface with sort of the system planet divide?
So an act, let me see if I can find it. The game, I'm literally just looking
Nick
at it.
Nick has the code open right now.
I wouldn't be able to remember it without that, honestly.
You're like, I remember the class name that's in my head.
Yeah, exactly. So here we go. So like the acts will say there's like basically the game will store, the game has a big like main list of like, okay, for the first 5 solar systems, you're in Act 1. And then Act 1 will say, Act 1 is a weighted list of like, okay, you have, it's like a 12-sided dice basically. 8 of those sides are a normal solar system, which is just, hey, you know, basic, here's all your stuff, here's everything. And then there's each one of the other sides is like, oh, this is an all asteroid system or an all like weird, you know, like really high cost, really kind of strange terrain system.
And you're defining those systems are scriptable objects. So they're linking to predefined.
Yes, that's all like
that's not a dirty word here. I just want to be sure.
Oh, yeah.
We can say predefined. It's okay. But so those are linking. So you've gone and defined what asteroid only system means. It's
exactly.
not like
and
a fluke generation.
Yeah, and specifically, yeah, for sure. Because building a template that could produce both just an asteroid only system and like a normal system would produce a lot of like middling things of like, one planet and a lot of asteroids. Like, well, that's not like really interesting.
2
right?
planets and a lot of asteroids.
Right. And it's like, oh, wow. And then I'd rather say, and like, this is something that we talked about internally, which was like, the procedural system shouldn't look like it's accidentally making anything. And so other little things linked with the unique system is like when you get to an all asteroid system, a little like every system you go to has like a little message popping up that says like, usually it's like, hey, nothing interesting is here. But then when you get to the asteroid system, it's like, hey, this is an all asteroid system, which is the game telling the player, this is intentional. This is like an interesting little diversion on your journey, not because I think the alternative is like, well, you show up to a system and it's just like kind of flatly presenting to you all asteroids or like one planet on asteroids. You're like, oh, that's kind of weird. Like, is this solvable? Is this doable? Is this meant to happen or whatever? And so that was something that with the templates, it's easy to go, oh, just attach a little text and flavor to this and we're off. Right. And so the act progressions say, right, pick a template from this weighted list and then go from there. And then as you get to the acts, Act 2 is essentially less weighted to the normal systems. And then Act 3 is when you get systems that don't have any of one like core resource, right? So you can show up and go, there is no water here at all. And that was actually the thing we were scared about people running into and going, oh, this is a bug, because I've just played like 8-10 solar systems where I had everything and maybe it was hard to get to, but now I'm here and there's no water at all. But that was something from the beginning of the project. We're like, well, we want like eventually the world to feel like really, really oppressive and against you. And like, yeah, you know, there's solar systems out there that don't have these things. Good luck. But if the player perceives it as a bug, then you know, that's a problem. And,
so are you accounting for sort of player state when you're generating systems across acts?
Not at all.
Gotcha. So you're just kind of like
no, and that's something. Yeah, and that's something that like I think is covered for the theme of the game, right? Which is like it's, you know, like a lot of. I don't want the game to be like, you know, like, oh, you know, masochistic and like get good kind of thing or whatever. Like the game does want to help you broadly, but in as much as the fiction of what you're doing, you're in this like uncaring solar system or uncaring universe that is just presenting solar systems to you. And at some point, like if you hit a system that doesn't have the resource and you just happen to not have that resource, that is a failed run. And like the theme of the game kind of like presents that okay. But yeah, no, it doesn't have to account for that, which is nice because you do less work.
What's also nice about this is that because you're sort of constraining the generation, you're able to control tempo thematically, right?
Yeah.
So you're not like, you don't end up getting the sort of weirdly lush system at the very end. Like you're even something that's like something that generates close enough to be considered lush where you're like, this is like a little more permissive than I want this to be.
Yeah.
I think
and
that's
the way
nice.
then the difficulty mode just kind of like scoots you forward on that progression faster. And so you'll hit the no resource systems sooner, and that's all it really does, which is a nice clean way for us to do difficulty and for the player. Do you still go through all
the acts, or do you start at a later act?
No, you just start at like Act 2 basically, and then I think the hardest difficulty is you start at Act 3, so you might just get immediately like fuck you, no water, which is like, well, if you know, hey, The difficulty is called like intense, I think. So I don't know. I feel like it's nice to have that cover for like the theme, but I really didn't want to have the kind of like, fuck you kind of tone overall. So the difficulty is all based on like just tuning the game to how you want to play, unless like you should be able to do it at the hardest difficulty kind of thing.
Right. What about resources? What's the story with them? Are they also scriptable objects? Are they different? How do you add more ones?
No, honestly, a resource. I mean, I think they are scriptable objects in that like they need the inventory system needs to know how they work, and they need to have like a sprite and that kind of thing. Otherwise, they're pretty light. It's just essentially
it's like a name, number, sprite.
Yeah, it's name and number, sprite, some flavor text. The way the resources are populated on planets is interesting though, because the planet grids. So like to get into the game specifically, like you land on a planet, you build buildings, and each building, and the grid is like, sometimes as small as like 2x2 or 3x3, and then maybe 6x6 on a surface, or 8x8 or something is the largest. And then you build a building, and you have to build a building on like a harvester building on the space that the resource is on, and then you cannot delete buildings once they're constructed. And
no undo button.
Yes. Well, you can restart the solar system, but the penalty for that is you just lost a lot of time of your own actual life doing that. And you can always.
I hate I love Into the Breach as much as the next person, but I hate the sort of implication that it made everybody think that every strategy game needs an undo button. It's like it's not. we don't have to have. It's part of the game.
I think I'm fortunate that people generally understood why there wasn't an undo button, and that was not a given from the beginning. We played around with it, and we're at some point.
So yeah, you have perfect information, more or less, right? Yeah. Like for Cantata, it was like sort of obviously not a good thing. I think that like in retrospect, maybe I could have done it and just been like, put my design ideals aside and been like, sure, fine. But yeah, if you reveal information, it feels like you shouldn't have an undo button. But yeah, I guess why not have an undo button if the game sort of has perfect info?
Well, the way it doesn't have perfect info is with the hazard dice rolls. So
sure. Okay.
You can, and I played around with like, okay, maybe if you had like a meta resource that is like, if you re-roll past a dice roll, if you undo past a dice roll or undo it all, you spend like knowledge or something. But it was really tricky to be like, well, you don't want to spend like a resource like iron or water, because that would like also
you want
give
like
you
a
weird incentives.
style, like
yeah, you want like a fate or just like
exactly.
Cosmic point system. Anyway, so at some point it was mostly like I would have always rather to not have an undo, and then we were considering it just from the reason of like, well, do people expect it, or like how much is it sticking to the design ideals versus not having it.
Right.
Anyway, so yeah, the resources on the surfaces of planets, they're basically populated to try and get in each other's way as best as possible. So
you mean by like the size of the building that harvests it?
Exactly.
Space.
Exactly. So every building that harvests a resource, that's the whole point. Every building that harvests a resource is a 2x2 square, and so when you get down to like a grid size that's like 4x4, if you can have two resources that are mutually exclusive, that breaks the perfect information of, because the player will have known, oh, there's there's silica and iron here. Great, I'll go there and I'll get what I need. And then you arrive and you're like, oh, building one blocks the other. Which one do I want to do? And so there was just some funky like grid searching bitmask stuff to like basically when it's populating, when the system is populating resources onto planets, obviously it doesn't want to put two next to one another, two on top of one another, but it can put two next to one another in such a way that it will make these really annoying.
And I guess it's not as if you are placing the buildings, so to speak, in the algorithm. You're taking for granted that something 2x2 can be placed. Therefore, I will place resources. It's not like you look at the buildings that correspond to the resource to then understand, because all the buildings are the same size. So like if you were to make like a water harvesting building be a 3x3, your placement for water would still be a 2x2 search, because you're not like searching you're not like going to the building first to say
no. It's just kind of like, it was basically predefined. It was just like a rule I set down for myself. Like just keep the harvester buildings 2x2 and go from there. But then what the search does is say, I can't remember the specific details, but it'll try not to put a resource in like a little dog leg. So it's
Sure.
like, if you show up, you could get that resource. You may not be able to get both or all three resources or something. And so there's some weird little like algorithmic rules it's trying to employ, but I can't remember. I think there might be a weird situation where that does happen because it doesn't have any other option or something like that. But broadly, yeah, trying to find a place where it's all doable, but you get those mutually exclusive options, which are fun for me as a designer and annoying for you as the player.
Well, this is interesting because I feel like I've encountered a very similar flavor of sort of what you're describing in like a lot of different forms, which is like, how do you define player choice? Because, and also like, how do you not boil that down? So like, I could see this, right, as a designer and say, okay, well, what you're really saying is that, at least as I take it, that you want to give the player sort of one choice. And I'm like, well, maybe instead of making them choose with a building placement, I would add another planet that has the other resource option that is equidistant from the starting location of the ship, such that the player has to choose a planet versus doing space contention. But then you're like, okay, well, if there's only one resource on a planet and it's all based around fuel, then it's not actually a choice to put something on a planet. So you can pre-place something there, but then if you're already placing, you don't actually need to go you can pull these threads. It's almost like you have like a kink, and not a bad kink, but it's like you have this bit of friction you've defined as sort of like the texture of the gameplay experience. And if you were to express that same idea differently,
it wouldn't really work.
in a way that in some way is like equitable at kind of the top level.
Yeah.
The sort of knock-on effects of that are like, can be almost catastrophic, right? Like you can sort of reveal that the game doesn't work or something.
Yeah, no, it is that this whole game has been an exercise in trying to land that like that emotional not understanding, but like emotional experience of space travel being extremely difficult and extremely resource intensive and very like on the knife edge. And yeah, it's all about like, okay, well, do I want to, look at this planet, it has like 4 resources on it. And you're like, well, but I know I can't get all 4. It's like, it's the likelihood that all 4 of those are going to be doable with each other or having enough space around each other is really low. So like, do I want to build a base here? Do I want to build like a spread out base or like, and then honestly, a lot of it also came down to like visual presentation of the map. And so having like the way the tree works really kind of drove a lot of weird things. So I briefly tried to have like a two-sided map where like you go up in a sense. If you've seen a screenshot of the game, all the planets go down towards you, but that was going to be kind of a pain. So I just didn't do it and then just lived with the consequences, which is also the story of the game.
Well, I think what's also nice is that the like almost like hermetic feel of the map makes it like you get away with the planet thing. Cause like I've never played the game and felt like, Nick's fucking with me. Like it sort of felt to your point, like it feels sort of thematically relevant where it's like, here's a planet and there's some stuff on it. Yeah, no, it's not
go there or don't.
Perfectly spaced out for you to use it because it's a fucking planet. I don't know if I can cuss on this podcast. I to determine if I can cuss on the podcast or not. But yeah, what's sort of nice about it is that there's that thematic fallback of like, you're fudging it as a designer, but as a player, you're like, I have to make a decision here. And that's kind of exciting. And the decision for its own sake is almost like more compelling than trying to like solve the design problem and manifest that decision differently.
Yeah. And broadly, the game at many other levels tries to be, it's not fully neutral, right? But it tries to be as close to being like, this is like a vision of space and it is presented to you as fairly as possible. So like the dice rolls for hazards don't have any kind of fudging for the percentage chances of like succeeding a roll, which every other game does.
And you're very ambitious of you, yeah.
Yeah, it's fine. I don't mind it. This is not like a hill
you're
I'm
saying
dying
80% is not an auto success.
I have done it in other games that I've worked on, But for this, it's like, no, those dice are being quote unquote physically rolled. What happens is what happens. And like the way the like undos or restarting a solar system is always the same. And that's why the difficulty system gets into configuration more than difficulty, which is like, okay, I want to have like this kind of experience or that kind of experience. And then once you start, it's just that experience for the whole way through.
What about text? How do you deal with text in the game? You got a lot of text.
Yeah.
What's your text pipeline?
It's actually because the original thinking was like, oh, maybe we do localize this and kind of make it a little bit more flexible. But the amount of text eventually was like, well, not only is this a lot of text in a lot of like cramped interface, a lot of the like flavor text and stuff is very, I don't know how well it would localize. And there's a lot of like weird little funky made up words. And so the text is all just handwritten and just written straight into probably the scriptable objects, a lot of like same kind of weighted lists of like, okay, if you're going to pull some flavor text for the solar system, here's a couple options, pick one and go from there. And like, like the resource definitions next to the sprite is here's the flavor text for the sprite. It's all just kind of handwritten into the Unity editor, which is honestly kind of a pain in the ass. Writing text into the Unity editor is not the best experience. If I had to make another one of these, it would be almost certainly just like a big JSON file that it would just go and like, here's a key value pair and go get what you want.
Right. Because if you were to ever localize, you have to either like you have to like attach a script to every single text object, or you have to put it in a proper like database.
Yeah. Well, the localization issue was more on the interface side of things, because if you've seen a screenshot of the game, a lot of buttons are labeled with text. There's very, very few symbols in the game as far as like this button just has a symbol in it to mean something. And that is partly, I think, just a stylistic choice to make it feel more like an old fashioned board game where they just have like reams of text on cards and like no sense of graphic design or layout, which I do want to have a sense of graphic design and layout, but I wanted to evoke like old style board games compared to like, I don't know, new games rely on a lot of iconography for better and worse.
I'm thinking like really big like games like an Arc Nova or something. Like that game doesn't function in print without symbology.
Exactly.
It's like you sort of need like symbols on cards in order for it to express itself, just because of the density of mechanics.
Yeah. And then partly I was worried that like, oh, like this game's already kind of asking a lot of people, and then to like learn a symbolic language on top of that, I was worried it would just like really fall flat. So there's a lot of text squeeze on screen, which then means like, well, if you localize this word, suddenly it's 25% bigger, and then it has to still fit, and then it's got to pass cert for Steam Deck and et cetera, et cetera. So it was kind of those like, ideally we would localize it and the game would be localized from the jump and have all the data skewed that way, but it wasn't.
Best laid plans, or best thought about plans.
Exactly.
What about save files? Do you save? I don't remember if you can like save in the middle. Do you only save at the start? Like what is the?
It saves in the middle. Yeah.
And then, so what are you saving? How is it saved? How are you loading it?
All the seeds are saved. No like procedural generation level data is saved. And then
you just regenerate off the same seed.
Yep. Yeah. Just regenerate it. And then it stores basically every location, which is like an orbit or a surface or whatever, stores the like inventory, because you can like leave stuff in a spot in a sense. So it stores the inventory, it stores the buildings, which are just lists of ints that point to, like, hey, you have this ID of this list ID of your inventory and buildings and the positions of the buildings and the rotations and all that. The ships are the most like directly like big objects, because a ship is like, okay, it has to have people on it, and the people have like perks and abilities, and then there's inventory on the ships, and you have an engine on a ship and all that kind of thing, and like how much fuel is loaded into the ship.
Is it like as straightforward as just like serializing the ship, or do you have to kind of gather things from different places and
it's just the ship serialized pretty much. It's not like I don't really like doing the like take a game object from Unity and just serialize it whole cloth. So I'll make like its own class that just stores the data it needs to and then regenerate it from there. But no, it's all just pointers to a big data cache that is like, here's all of the exiles and all the inventory items and everything, and just store a reference to that list. Or sorry, not a reference to the list, like an ID to the object, and it'll go through the list and find the ID, which is a little bit safer.
Do the objects
go from there?
Do any of the objects themselves have state that has to be saved, or is it just like amounts? I don't remember if like an engine part can be like damaged, so you need to save a specific ID, or can you just save like this is an engine part, and then I have 10 of these, and you could just say that? Yeah,
the parts, the items themselves don't have state. The people do, so they have like a little. They have their faith, the actions they have, any abilities, that kind of thing. But that's a pretty straightforward, just like numbers, a couple ints and a couple references, and that's it. So it's just all pretty lightweight.
Serialized as JSON saved out. Yeah.
No, I think it's binary, but it could just easily be JSON.
Cool. What about sound? How do you work with like sound data? Yeah,
sound is fun for this because it's just like make a big playlist and play it, and we've got like the key track for like the menu, and then we've got like shop music was what we called it, which is like when you're in between solar systems, it's just like play something that's like a little bit different.
Are you guys using like Wise or Fmod or anything?
No. It's an asset. I forget the name. Audio Toolkit, probably, I think is what it's called, which is honestly like good enough for what we need. And then it's mixed using the Unity's audio mixer, which is not bad. It's not Wise, obviously.
But an audio person that, yeah.
No, I have, and I've got some looks. It is. I'll say this: it's better than most Unity features, which puts it like into the okay, I could use this category.
Yeah.
And it's just a big playlist, and how the game treats things is it does two kind of like fun adjustments. Is as you tick down over the course of a solar system, so it's 30 turns, that the turn number is just basically fed into an interpolated reverb value for all audio in the game. And so it gets more and more reverby as you play, which is fun. And then if you get down to, I think like 5 turns left or 10 turns or something like that, if the playlist system wants a new track, it'll choose a tension track, which is just like a little bit higher tempo and a little bit nastier. And then the playlist will frequently play gaps of silence just for like a little more ominous vibes. Yeah. And it'll just feed the like interface and like ambient room tones in, and then there won't be music for 5, 10, 30 seconds, and then bring in a track and play that. So really, really, really straightforward. Nothing too dynamic.
Is this like, I'm interested, so you work at Bithell Games, you've worked on other stuff there. Is the Banished Vault sort of from this perspective, like scriptable objects, Unity audio mixer, God bless you? Is that like sort of an efficiency for the label, sort of the way the Banished Vault was released, where you were like, we're gonna be trim, or is this kind of like a pattern you've developed over time at Bithell, like kind of is it just like the workflow,
I mean, the funny answer is it's trim because that's the pattern we've built.
That's fine. That answer is totally valid.
So like I have actually worked with Wise before. It was challenging for like the size of team we are, and so it was like, okay, like that was like a useful learning experience. I think I'm happy just using like a simpler asset, basically. Scriptable objects, we've like essentially like slowly, we like in the past for like previous games, we had some like more custom like editors and things for like dialogue. And obviously there's not dialogue here, but like we've kind of gravitated towards like, okay, scriptable objects are kind of like just like the simplest way to like input data into Unity. And then getting to this, I mean, I'm the only full-time developer on the project. So many decisions were like, I know how that works and I can work with it quickly. The Unity audio mixer is not the best mixer in the world, but I know how to set up like some chains and some ducks and, the things that I needed how to do it with. And same thing for basically everything else.
Are there any sort of like internal frameworks, packages, tools, like whatever that you use across projects that are like worth talking about for this? Like things that kind of help you get going from that sort of data scaffolding programming standpoint?
Not really. I mean, we reuse a lot of, or I reuse a lot of like, extension methods and things like that. But I think as far as like Unity assets, like I like the audio toolkit. We use like Steamworks.net is good, but yeah, it's all like, I want to say it's all custom made in a sense, but it's all like we're trying to find the path of least resistance with Unity's tools to get stuff done, really. Because yeah, I think as well, like I there are some assets that are like great, and then I've had experiences with assets that are like well designed but over designed for what you need, and then it becomes as much work to like bend it back into shape, and it's not that asset's fault, but it's like, well, this is just not really like fit to purpose for now. Yeah.
No, I feel that makes sense. I mean, I guess, yeah. And then because the development timeline was like year and a half, 2 years.
No, it was 18 or 19 months, something like that. It started in January and released in July. So like end of July. So like
that was like full release, right? You didn't do like early access.
Yeah. Full release.
I mean, that's like a tight timeline to like get this type of thing out. So
yeah, that's the other thing as far as like, I'm by myself and don't have much time. So get going.
Let's get back to talking about the tutorial, and we can wrap up here by the next like 5 or 10 minutes. So tutorial stuff. You said it was like seeded. Mm-hmm. I don't remember. I played it. I don't have the tutorial again because I played it a while ago, but was there any sort of special stuff you had to do to make the tutorial work?
Yeah. So the tutorial is pre-seeded, and it's seed like 100 or something. And it using the kind of like acts/map progression, there is like a secret act 0 that if you skip the tutorial, it starts you in act 1, and it actually like skips 2 solar systems, which are the tutorial. And those are all the planets in the systems are like really bent out of shape to say like, okay, you only have one planet and it looks exactly like this, and it's always on this seed, and the seed will always put, the resource here. So then the tutorial, which is all done through the manual, can have screenshots in the manual that line up to what the procedural generation will produce. And then there's some basically really simple queuing systems where it's like you start and like a lot of the UI is like stripped out, and you don't even have the vault to like look at. And then once you like go down to the planet and come back up, it'll then show you the vault, and it's like, okay, now go back to the vault and go to the next solar system.
And those are all like presumably like custom triggers you had to build just for
so
right?
it is very much like, okay, when you leave a planet and you're in solar system -2 and you're in like phase 2 of this thing, then do the thing.
And this is just like a nice, just beautiful block of code just in the middle of the rest of the gameplay code, right?
Yeah, nice. It's like 50 lines just standing out, just like do this horrible thing. But honestly,
like region tutorial, do not touch.
Yeah. Look, you're welcome to make this entire game yourself and then show me a better way to do it. Tutorials are such like it's
one of those things people think it's so easy, but it is so hard because you're like, the way to do it, Nick,
and
is what I did.
So hard.
I built a whole map editor to like make the campaigns for Cantata, which made making a tutorial easy. But it was only easy because I just rebuilt a Unity inside of Cantata.
Yeah.
And even then, like triggering like sequential dialogue around conditions and actions is like very hard.
It's so hard,
especially if you want to unless you like. And you have no reason to do that, right? You're using PCG stuff.
Yeah.
Like,
I wouldn't say it's not hard in that it's difficult to figure out how to do. It's hard to like do it right, not redo it 5 times, and do it in scope and on budget. And
well, you have to put like coder tunnel vision on because you're like everything you're talking about, is like bad code. You're like, this is so antithetical to everything.
Random switch statement right in the middle of.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. There's no magic there. It's just
no, absolutely.
It's what it is.
The most that I like really broke from things is doing it with the manual and just being like, hey, you have to read text to understand this game.
Yeah, you want to talk about that for a second? That's like a crazy thing about the Banished Vault. I have a copy somewhere next to me. I'm gonna you can start talking about it. I want to find it and show you.
Well, so from the jump, it was just like, hey, this game's gonna be really hard to learn, and like I knew from the beginning, it was like, If you just did a like regular, pop-up box on the screen pointing to, there it is. Yeah. Pop-up box on the screen pointing it to like an element and go, here's how this works. And you like, click next and yada, yada. It would take like 2.5 hours to like teach the entire game. Right. And it's like, nobody's going to put up with that. And so from like very early, I was like, I think a manual is going to be like weirdly the way to go, because you can read people can read like blocks of text way, way, way quicker just on a page. You can always go back and like, if you read the next paragraph and then you realize you don't understand what's going on, you can just like literally your eyes can move 2 degrees upwards and reread something. And then, the tutorial was like, okay, we're going to get you up to speed on how do you move a ship and like, consume fuel to move a ship. How do you build on a planet to gather resources to make yourself more fuel? And then from there, it's like, cool. The rest of this game is explained in this book. You can read it in any order you want. You can read it not at all. You can read it all at once, and go from.
And just to be clear, it's also a physical book. It's
you can get a physical book if you want. Yeah.
And then Amazon.com, or I guess maybe you sell it from your personal.
No, it's print on demand. We don't make any money from the Amazon. It's basically like at cost as best as we could. So you can buy many more copies off Steam and instead of buying a bunch of copies on Amazon.
Do you have like a plan if the rules change? Like, do you update the book?
So we had a couple of updates after the game came out, and we basically just released like a 1 or 2 page addendum to like, hey, if you already have the book, here's like a single letter sheet or A4 sheet. And we updated the like Amazon version.
Okay, so actually you like patched the book, so to speak.
Yeah, in a really loose sense, but otherwise we didn't balance the game after it came out. And basically the plan was like, okay, if this, if things do go so great that we want to do like a year of updates, then we'll like do like volume 2 of the book. And it's like, hey,
sure,
we understand you bought it, but like we've done a lot of work. Here's volume 2 and so on and so forth. But yeah, we didn't get to that.
You're not a multi-millionaire from your esoteric strategy game.
No, I'm still in the same apartment.
That's so surprising to me. I just can't imagine.
I mean, I can see Mount Everest behind you, so I don't know what I did wrong.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm just in the Alps right now. All my cantata money is.
Yeah.
Cool. Anything else you want to talk about with Banished Vault, or welcome to close it up? And
no. I think honestly, as far as like data stuff goes, we hit all the fun things. It was fun to make. It was a lot
of. Did you crack open the project again?
Yeah. A little bit actually. It was a bit like figuring out where things are. It was fun to make. I will say it was just as hard for me to play as it is for anybody else to play. So if that makes you feel better.
Cool. Well, Nic, thank you so much for being on Game Data episode 2.
Thank you.
Do you want to plug socials, anywhere people can find you? What's next? All that stuff.
Nothing to say about what's next. Socials. I mean, I'm on Twitter and Blue Sky at Nic Tringali, and I'm also on co-host, which I prefer to the other two, just at Nic. And yeah, I'm honestly just kind of shit posting until I have something to talk about. So that's it, really.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, and I'll hopefully talk to you and see you again sometime soon.
Yeah, thanks. Have a good night.